Welcome to the Lift Every Voice podcast, where we explore books by contemplative writers of color. I'm Christine Valters Paintner.
And I'm Claudia Love Mair. We are joined each month by the author of our book club selection. Together, we explore how increasing our diversity of perspectives on contemplative practice can enrich our experience of the Christian mystical tradition.
We encourage you to join us by reading the book, listening to the conversations, and engaging with the reflection questions on our website at abbeyofthearts.com. Welcome everyone to our Lift Every Voice book club, and I'm delighted to be back again here with my ongoing conversation partner, Claudia Love Mair, and to welcome Felicia Murrell today to talk about her beautiful book and the Restorative Power of Love in an Either-or World. So who doesn't want more of that? So Felicia is a spiritual companion, speaker, certified master life coach, and former ordained pastor with over 20 years of church leadership experience. She also serves the publishing industry as a freelance copy editor. With a deep understanding of what it means to be human, Felicia is dedicated to empowering individuals to embrace who they already are and who love is inviting them to be. And I'll just add, she's also just a very beautiful, gifted writer. So highly encourage you to get the book, and we're going to have a lovely conversation here today. So Claudia Love, I'm going to pass it over to you to start us off.
Thank you. Felicia, please tell us about your spiritual journey, how your faith progressed, and how you came to write this book at this time.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. First, let me just say thank you for having me with you today. I'm excited to be here. How my spiritual journey, I think, honestly, I have always just been searching for love. And it feels like love is the place where everything began. Love is the energy that changed me. And I say that in that my upbringing is that I'm churched. I grew up in the rural South. So we were in church every Sunday. So I read a lot of the Bible, but I was also not a very nice person in all of my Bible reading and all of that. I don't think it was the knowledge of something that was causing transformation. But what kept me on a search was just as a child, I really kind of had, I lived a very thin life, if that makes any sense, of just being very connected to um, other realms in a world that was larger than just our human realm. So I knew that there was something larger than all of us that connected all of us. And as a child, I couldn't name that as love, but I know now that that is love. Um, in my early 30s, I began to really encounter that in my life and began to learn the practice of contemplative spirituality that allowed for me to sit and have some divine therapy and allow for love's transformation to happen. So I think what happens is um, what led me eventually to this book is that I think often of, is it called cairns, the stack of stones?
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to leave a marker, a guidepost, and I wanted it to be something that might be of use or comfort to other sojourners on the way. Um, and to invite them into an experience, not just to think about God or the divine or love or higher power or whatever their name, not just to, you know, have a knowledge of something, but to really open themselves up to experiencing that.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So I just want to read this quote. I typed up so many quotes from your book because they're all so lovely. But this one says, within the frame of both and, our story and other stories weave together in the native language of being, which is oneness. This is not oneness that spiritually bypasses the beauty of particularity, but one that harmoniously holds the complexity of all things in their distinct and unique specificity. So I would love to hear more about this power of and, because obviously that's the book's title. So there's this invitation to hold things together. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Um, I think for me, and allows. And I think and this framework of and creates space and it makes room for opposing views, for two sides of the same coin, for diversity and complexity and multiplicity. Um, at least for me, and feels like a link. It feels like a connector for us in the circle of life. And I think just, I don't know, and allowed me to be with myself, the whole of all of my parts, without needing to cut any of them off or fragment them. And I think when we learn to gift ourselves that type of compassion, it overflows out of who we are into our worldview and our perspective. And I think that's how I landed at that, because it was the gift that I needed to move from self-harm and the unforgiveness that I was holding to myself into a deeper compassion.
It's beautiful. Do you have a memory of when and came to you as like the vehicle for expressing what you wanted to share with the world?
Hmm. Um, Probably one that's really fresh. I'm sure it's not the first one, but here in America, we had a justice that passed away, Justice Anton Scalia, I think was his last name, Scalia, and he essentially was a race baiter. I mean, in my worldview, he wasn't a nice man. He essentially said that Black people were dumb. They were too stupid to even get into the University of Texas, which is just a public university. Um, he had a lot of character defects in the way that he operated in life. And I remember when he passed away, um, a lot of my Christian friends were lauding him on social media posts and just, oh, he's a great man and, blah, 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 and all of that. And I was really getting upset about that because I felt some kind of way about the policies that he supported, about his judicial rulings, about him as a person. And and I remember just really wanting to like fire off a rapid kind of, response, how we do from that place. Um, and instead, I took a walk and I do a lot of like just mindful walking. It's a really great place for me to hear, to be with myself. And in that quiet, and I will have to say that my background is Pentecostal. So, in that Pentecostal upbringing, Spirit said, but I felt like Spirit was inviting me to see that Antonin Scalia was Spirit's beloved child as well, right?
Mm,
And that Spirit loved this man the same way he loved me and those of my hue, those of my race. Um, and there was this invitation to not allow the character defects of one person, of one man, to keep me from seeing the imago Dei or the divine in that person, and to be able to hold this and like, yes, he has harmed people, and he is also created in the image and likeness. And right, and that same invitation that you have to come home to love, to be formed in the image of love, and to live and move and have your being from love, he also has that same invitation. Just because we get an invitation doesn't mean we always say yes to it, but the invitation exists. And I think it was really that point that word kind of highlighted. So I think it had been there in the weaving, but I had not landed on it. And I can go back to that. And I started being able to see it. But also I think, when you read the Taoists really talk about this kind of contradiction and holding a paradox and the yin and the yang in a way that, at least in my faith tradition, I have not seen that so much in Christian teachings.
Yeah, thank you for that really beautifully expansive response. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a challenge to all of us when we think about people who have done so much damage to humanity, to remember that we have much more in common than what separates us, and to be able to see those that, as I know you love Kendrick, they not like us. To be able to also see that they were extended the same invitations of grace, and to know and be love. Okay, enough of that. My next question is, uh, in your preface, you write about the importance of knowing who you are. What does knowing who you are mean to you? What does that look like? And what are the barriers to self knowledge that we have?
Whew, that's a great one. I think I'm going to start at your last question and work my way back. But I think the barriers are resistance and fear. And for me, there's a scripture in the biblical narrative, and I think it's Psalms 139, but it's where it talks about the psalmist wrote, "You formed me, you formed my inward parts." I love that part. "You knit me together in my mother's womb. My frame was not hidden from you," I think is how it goes, that I was being made secret. And that for me encapsulates knowing. Knowing for me is coming home to the truth of your being. And so I think that when we get quiet, when we get still enough, we can hear our souls remembering, right? Um, that love allows us to glimpse our sacred core. And in that glimpsing, in that seeing, we begin to understand the truth of our own goodness. We begin to see and understand our inherent dignity, our sacred self-worth. And from that place of understanding, we begin to reacquaint our hearts, myself, with my quirks, my complexities, the ways I hide from myself, um, my golden shadows, my dark shadows, my personality, my temperament, all those outer layers, right? They're like window dressing for my true self. But I begin to understand why I have these outer layers, and I can again hold them with a sense of gratitude for what they have been in that. And I can welcome them home to the whole of me. And when I see the truth of my being, right, then I began to live and move out of that, and the way of my being comes into alignment. And that's what I think knowing is. It's not just like, oh, I know that I'm a Enneagram 8. I know that I'm a, Virgo sun with an Aquarius moon and a Libra rising. Yes, all those things are true of me. And yes, I've acted out of some of those. But at the core, when the divine was knitting and weaving me together, there was a song, right? That this I think is when Elijah, I think it was, went out, and he's listening for something, and there's an earthquake, there's a wind, there's all these distractions. And then in one translation, it says there's the sound of sheer silence. And what always captures me is that silence has a sound. And I think that sound is the song of our lives, the song of our hearts, right? And so when we hear that, and we begin to live out of that, that's knowing.
That's wonderful. Lovely. Thank you.
I wonder if we could follow up on that. Do you have a copy of your book with you? I wonder if you could, on page 92 and 93, you have this beautiful poem about silence, since you were just talking about that. And I wonder if you could maybe read that aloud for us, and then we could talk a little bit about silence. Yeah.
If you're silent, you can hear the forest breathe, the holy hush of trees' limbs. Silence, wrote Thomas Keating, is God's first language. The way it soaks into your skin, surrounds you, blanketing you like the forest's breath. Silence, the cadence of the land at rest, the body asleep, the heart awake. Silence, the deep rhythmic breathing of a mind slowed down, an ocean still. Wet dew clinging to grass blade. Silence, the sacred song trapped in a bird's breast before its first chirp. The still of night across a desert landscape, wrapped in a bone-aching chill before the sun rises to scorch its parched earth. Silence, the lusty gaze of onlookers staring at the Negro on the lynching tree. Neck snapped, life ended, feet dangling, back and forth, back and forth. Silenced. Hands up, don't shoot! Body thrumming with a heady sense of power. Hands in pocket, resting pose. Knees embedded into a man's neck. Silence, please. I can't breathe. Silenced.
That was gorgeous, Felicia. Thank you for bringing that beautiful poem to life. I wonder if you would talk a bit about that tension that you hold in there between the gift of silence and being silenced.
That's a tough poem.
Yeah.
The first time I actually was made aware of this tension was through a teacher, Felina Hewitts. I really had never considered it before. And she actually is a white teacher, but she was speaking of how a lot of marginalized people struggle with silence as a practice in contemplation because for a long time they have lived silenced.
Yeah.
And so that was my first kind of introduction to the thought of this tension between silence and silenced. And then I was beautifully gifted with the opportunity to learn from Dr. Barbara Holmes, who wrote a book called Joy Unspeakable. And Dr. Barbara Holmes, in her book, introduced the world really to the idea of contemplation that looks different than just this kind of quiet sit. The beauty of the transcendence of how the Black church enters into contemplation. And it made me really think about words, etymology of words, how we use them, how we abuse them, the pictures that we mean when we say them, the weight that we give to them. And for me in my life, as an introvert, I have a real kind of deep respect for silence. I have a deep respect for stillness and solitude. And I draw energy from that reserve when I need to go away. But at the same time, because I grew up in a family system that was bereft with dysfunction and physical abuse, mental abuse, I know the power of being silenced. And I think how we hold the tension is in the power of choice.
Yes.
It's one thing to choose to participate in the act of silence as a practice, to be silent, to sit in silence, to listen for that sound of sheer silence. And it's another to be the victim of being silenced, to be forced into invisibility or to be forced into harm or abuse because of someone else's desire and need for power.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with the poem. A lot of times when I'm writing, it comes out of, it's a way to empty my insides. But it also feels like the dance of love being channeled through me.
Mhm.
I feel like I pick up the
Mhm.
energy of the world, and that sometimes the angst, sometimes the joys. And in that, the tension between silence and silenced, there's so much beauty that we can um, see and lean into when we are silent, the things that we see, the awe and the wonder that evokes in that stance. And on the other side of that space that's created, you get to see the whole of the circle of life, which also includes the damaging parts,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of that tension between silence
Yeah.
and
Thank you so much. I really appreciate how you speak about human agency as kind of the core of it and what we're, yeah,
yeah.
what is our choice in that. Thank you for that.
Your poem reminded me of some of the terrible things that are continuing to happen in the world. I want to share this quote. You write, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." Felicia, as you know, white supremacist groups like the neo Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan are becoming much more visible, sadly, and this trend seems to be taking us backward rather than progressing us forward. Will you share your thoughts about the kind of change which seems to make us collectively worse?
Yeah. Whew, that's a statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly given that yesterday was January 6th here. It's like, but that's Octavia Butler's statement from The Parable of the Sower, and Lauren creating that, her religion, Earthseed. And I think just in what I've read of Octavia Butler, I'm no scholar of her work, but I do love it. But I think when she was writing that, it was meant to be a statement of observation more than fact. And I think for me, when I look at nature, when I think about river rocks and trees and flowers and animals, I'm, you know, often I'm not necessarily like thinking a lot about them. But then I move into this invitation of really gazing at a river rock, a stone, animal, plant, all anything from a lone loving look. And when I think about all of these ecosystems, they all go through the process of change. And it almost feels like, I don't know, I'm none of those things. So I don't understand and know they're conscious from the inside, but it almost feels like they allow and have surrendered to their circle of life. Um, and we don't. And I think um, what's happening, why it feels like it's getting collectively worse, is because all across the globe, you have people that are struggling with ways to manage change. There's so much resistance and fear, and is so much desperation and clinging to certainty and what we imagine safety should be, right? We have all of these ideas in our heads of expected outcomes. And um, I do get that. I understand that need for safety. But I think what happens is when we don't allow for the unfolding of mysteries, and we really have not lived in a society that has welcomed mysteries or have really welcomed a large cosmic kind of universal interconnectedness at all. But when we don't live in a society that allows for the unfolding of mysteries, we and when we've been sold, particularly in America, a Christianity that is all about conquest, domination, control, and subduing. You're going to subdue the earth, you're going to subdue this. Then, when we are faced with change that touches that place of resistance or touches that place of fear, we rise up in opposition to dominate it.
Mm.
And that's what you have going on now. And particularly in America, when I look at our politics, when I look at who's leading, when I look at corporations, largely what you see are old white men.
Yeah.
That's what you see. And there's a lot of clinging to power. And even when I recognize that I have to relinquish power, I'm going to raise up a younger white man to put in this place. And I think when the census came out in America that said the demographics were changing, that there were going to be largely, the Black and brown bodies would switch and be a majority, I think it scared the bejeebus out of a lot of people. And so then all of those mindsets of where we get these ideas about purity and whiteness and supremacy and protect the race under the guise of America first or making it great again, um, you start seeing this collective worsening. But I also think at the same time, back to human agency, I think the thread of love is always an extending an invitation for the whole of the cosmos to come home to
Mm.
itself. In the biblical narrative, it says creation is groaning, right? And so when I come into alignment, my alignment is just not about leaving a personal legacy or finding a purpose or destiny. It's about participating with others that are also in alignment that brings us into a cosmic shift for good, for the
Mm.
whole of, the cosmos, for the whole of the universe. So I think that's the change that I might can't cause this neo-Nazi group to disband. But as I come together in myself and I consider what's the most loving thing I can do right now, that energy of love is doing its work. I really believe that.
Mm.
I hope that kind of answers your question a little.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It's really gorgeous. And I want to read this quote from you about love and just invite you to kind of break this open a little bit, because you say, you see, dear soul, underneath the unrest and chatter, love is doing what love always does, steadying you, holding you, supporting you. Even when you feel off the rails and flailing about, love is there. Dear soul, love is our anchor, our sounding board for truth telling. Love is our plumb line, our bulwark, our calm in a turbulent sea. So I love this image of love's abiding power. And I do believe this very much with you. And how do we remember this when the sea is really turbulent? And, are there practical as well as more kind of mystical ways of returning to that sense of that anchor in ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so funny. And I'm actually laughing because you know, I think a lot of us really wanted and hoped and expected that the outcome of this election would be that we would be electing our first Black female president. I think we wanted it. I still feel, even just saying that, I felt the punch of grief still that I didn't know was still inside me in that way. And and I remember the next day, that was me. Um, where I'm going to go is so funny. So the next day on social media, of course, people are expressing their outrage, their sorrow, their all of it. I get it. I felt I felt the whole of it. I understand it. But it was so funny because a lot of us who consider ourselves spiritual teachers or spiritual practitioners of some kind, we all were encouraging people to breathe, breathe. And so someone created this really funny meme, and literally, like, the world was on fire behind, and the meme said, the world is on fire. And then it had like this spiritual teacher leaning down going, breathe, breathe. And I had to laugh because the first thing that we want in crisis is comfort. We
Yeah.
want a reassuring presence. And so what I have to offer and why I love with that is because I don't want to deny that need. But your question feels like an iceberg. And what I really want to do is to kind of go underneath the expected response.
Mm.
And yes, maybe it will kind of go a little bit more mystical than practical. I do think practically one thing, when you have been in the practice of been in contemplative practices for as long as I have, your first response is to kind of, okay, I need to step back for a minute. I do need to pause and breathe. I do need breathe. I do need to be with what I'm feeling and to allow, to
Yeah.
allow, to allow. But for someone that has not kind of created that amount of spaciousness within themselves, there also has to be a grace for what
Mm.
comes up. Um, and not to try to correct it or fix it, but just
Yeah.
to be with it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but for me, love is the sea.
Mm.
If I fall into the sea, even there in the abyss, love is there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to offer something that I realize can be scary. Um, I want to name that. And I want to name that love can be trusted. And that is, if the boat is overturned, I want to invite people to let go of their resistance,
Mm-hmm.
to let surrender replace struggle.
Mm.
Water can hold us. It absolutely can hold us if we don't curl or fold in on ourselves, right? Into postures of resistance. I used to be a person that could not float. Like, I've tried so hard and my body would literally go into a V. And my kids were taking swim lessons once, and I remember just saying that to the swim instructor. And the guy was like, "Oh, I'll teach you." And so over a process of time, he taught me to float. But what I learned about myself was that I didn't trust the water and I didn't trust my own body.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, when we are in the midst of chaos and in the midst of torment and the midst of hell and in the midst of the disappointment of unexpected outcomes, is trusting. I have to do this we have 4 adult kids that range in age from 33 to 27. And the thing that I tell myself over and over again, particularly when I get scared for something they're doing or choosing or something happening in their life, is, can I trust love with them the way I trust love with me?
Mm. Wow.
Can I trust love with this sea, with this circumstance, with this torment, the way I trust love with me? And can I trust my own history with myself to know that, oh, baby girl, we have been here before.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it might be dark right now, but days coming. Let go, surrender, lay back, and float.
Mm.
In the biblical narrative, Jesus said it like, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's the greatest act of trust
Yeah.
that we have in the biblical narrative. But we make it about something else, but really it's an invitation to trust. And so I think that um, often in life, we are not protected from life happenings. Life happens, right?
Mhm.
But love always sustains us, even in the happenings.
Yeah. That's such an exquisite response, Felicia. And I so appreciate your vulnerability in that. And I'm also smiling because every Wednesday I go to an aqua yoga class and we spend the first 10 minutes floating. And I I love it so much because exactly that. I just imagine myself like floating on the sea of love, and what am I still grasping onto? What am I still clinging onto? And I have to let it all go to be able to like move into that float. So thank you for that image.
Love that.
Felicia, you write, justice is right alignment. Every person on the planet has the right to exist in their own skin and to walk out their journey with the divine in their own way without policing their path based on my agreement with their decisions or personal beliefs. I have found that you can talk a lot of people into doing harmful things if they believe it's what God wants. If they sincerely believe that they are right and believe that the love of God and others compels them, they can act upon these beliefs, interpreting the scriptures through their own lens. Chattel slavery was justified by Christians, miscegenation, systemic oppression, all by well meaning people often. And we see that today. What are some practical steps that we can take to reconcile with other Christians that believe, we who are more progressive, who might be pro choice, LGBTQIA plus affirming, etc.? How do we deal with them thinking that we're deceived and going to hell, but their way of walking out their faith is not only the way, but the only way, when both parties are acting in what they perceive as Jesus's love?
That's a very beautiful question. It's so profound. Um, I think for me, beyond being reconciled to myself, like I always want to know and be aware of my own seat of motivation. And what I mean by that is I'm asking myself questions like, what do I hope to accomplish? Will this engagement strengthen or diminish connection? Because honestly, this is just Felicia, but honestly, I'm not certain that there is a level of reconciliation that will happen when people are that rigid.
Mm.
I think we can coexist peacefully, but I think that's not reconciling us to a place of into me you see, right? That's intimacy. Into me you see. And I say that from my own experience because my mom was one of those people before she passed away. And we had for a long time a lot of conflict because I wanted her to see me and to accept me and to allow me to be as I am, even if it differed with the way she thought I should be, or the way she saw God and her beliefs. And for a long time, because I didn't know how to reconcile it, I just was like, you know what? I don't want to be a Christian. Like if that's what Christianity is, I don't want that. Like I don't need that. And I think what happened in my 30s when I came to really encounter love, the person of love, the intimacy and the largeness, the bigness of love, it also allowed me to see that my mom was acting out of her own fears and her own inability to move beyond the places where she was wounded. And so it gave me a real sense of compassion for where she was, back to and, right? Um, but inside of that knowing, inside of that insight and understanding of this is just who she is and how she is. And honestly, until she has her own encounter with love, she's probably not going to move from those beliefs. So knowing that, no, I have to decide what I can do and what I can't do, what I will do and what I won't do. So I'm developing my own sense of boundaries because this is a relationship that will happen. I want to be in some type of relationship with her. even though I know that relationship won't ever have the level of into me you see that I desire,
Yeah.
right? And so that means that the little girl in me that wants to be loved and seen by her mom, I'm not going to get it from outside. I have to give it to myself.
Mm.
So I think when our seat of motivation is people pleasing or just a desire to, I want people to like me. I want to be right, or even that, because if you've been in the Christian faith tradition, you've likely grown up as an apologist where you're defending the faith. So I want to defend my position. I want to protect what I think is right. So if we come into it from anything other than love, we will feel the need to always state our positions. Um, but I think when I understand my own non-negotiables, then I get to decide how far I'm willing to go, um, so that this doesn't end well with us, right? So I'm not going to join someone in a place that is going to be an argument. You can argue, right? Because how I came to me was not through you. And part of that, again, is that we hand our power over outside of us. And so what we want is some external validation. But when I understand that the ground of our being, the source of our being is within me, and how I came to be LGBTQIA affirming, how I came to believe all these things that are inclusive and generous was through love, then I'm just going to believe what I believe, and I'm going to trust that on your journey with love, whether in this world or the next, that your eyes and hearts will be open to also want to include. But that's not my job. It's not my job to reconcile with you.
Mm.
It's only my job to decide the level of engagement that I want to have with you.
Yeah.
I can't convince anyone, and I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really profound. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, the boundaries in that are really refreshing too. I love that. Yeah, I want to talk about what you wrote about purpose, because it I think it weaves into this really beautifully. And you said you wrote, I used to think of purpose as a one-off, fulfilling singular clarion call, and destiny as an achievement, a destination to arrive at, and an accomplishment. Then I realized that purpose isn't static. My purpose is to incarnate my unique expression of divine love, to live fully in my incarnate humanity with clarity and keen awareness. I am to say yes each day to participating in love's dance, and to mutually and reciprocally give to others the love I receive in the fellowship of the knowing. And I love that so much, because I do feel like there's a lot of messaging in kind of Christian churches around purpose being very much like linear and very much sort of achievement focused, and yeah, a destination you arrive at. So can you describe this shift, and how how do you live in that sense of purpose? Like what how does that is that embodied in you? Do you know?
I will say, I mean, I was really caught up in that whole Christian messaging,
Yeah.
and I raised my kids with that Christianese of, being a history maker and a world changer, and the whole thing. And so a lot of this is the unraveling of that Christianese and that conditioning for me. And and I think for me, Love and I, we do this dance between contentment and apathy, right? Because there's
Mm.
a thin line. And so I'm always leaning into, I have this kind of handshake with spirit. And my handshake is that I will say yes unless I sense a strong no, because
Mhm.
it's too easy for me to just chill, just be apathetic, to lean back. Um, because I think I was trying to, again, resist this idea of purpose and destiny so much. But I also understand that every single person on this planet, we don't just have gifts, we are a gift. We
Mm.
are a gift, right? And how the energy of love is expressed in the earth is when we tap into the truth of our being and participate with love in the release of our gift into the world. And so I think for me, I'm going to go back to the preface of the book where I say, none of the things I do is a calling for me. The significance of my existence is not attached to any lofty purpose. I exist to exist. I exist to love. Love is my expression of I am, right?
Mm.
And so the role and function is the vehicle of how I live in that experience, is how I give it away to others. And that role and function varies and changes based on anything, but none of those labels are my purpose in life.
Yeah.
Um, so the yes before me right now, spiritual direction, writing, coffee, Zoom, wine. Yes, yes to all of that. Why? Because I love people. I love to see people flourish and move in freedom. And so speaking, teaching, all those things are vehicles for me to participate as the gift that I am in the world. This is my dance with love, right?
Mm.
And so, you hear people say like I have to write, like I could never write, or I have to sing, or I have to do this, and they have a sense of calling about it. I don't have that type of calling other than I know for sure what makes me come alive is their interaction with people and when they begin to change and give themselves permission to be free and to flourish.
Mm.
And however I can participate with love in assisting that, cheering that on, that feels like purpose to me,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, I got to go out and create a platform or make a name or get a business card. It's just, okay, love, what does this look like today?
Yeah. Yeah.
And being awake enough in myself that when I understand this is the moment that I get to participate, I can say yes to that, unless it's a strong no.
Yeah. I love that because I think people get so caught up in like figuring out their purpose. What is God wanting me to do today? And it's like, what if we just ask that bigger question? Like, how is God calling you to love today? Like, that seems like a much
Yeah.
easier and harder question to answer at the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That energy of aliveness too. I
yeah,
think we
yeah.
don't pay enough attention to where do I come alive? I'm watching my husband now as he's living with a terminal cancer, right?
Mm.
And I think because of that, um, his hell no is really loud. Like once he hits on something and it's a hell no for him, we've been married for over 30 years. And in the past, he would stay with something long past the hell no, just because he's very loyal, right? And so, but now when you're living with a terminal cancer, that hell no is real loud for him. And so if he's not, I call it the energy of aliveness. But if he's not experiencing that sense of aliveness in something that he's doing, he's like, yeah, I'm done with that.
Yeah,
And I love it. Like I'm over here laughing about it because it's so freeing to see someone really that. When you get that, you
yeah,
can dance the world.
yeah. Illness has such a way of bringing clarity, and I wish that wasn't the case for you and your husband. And it's beautiful to see what you're holding out of that and finding the laughter and the purpose.
It
Yeah,
makes you really, really, really hold with preciousness the gift of time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think we could all learn a lot more about how to live from
Mhm.
those who are dying.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for your trouble, Felicia. I want to take us back to November 2024. And you write, it is imperative to know that people are wounded, they are hurting. Whether we understand or agree with it, it's imperative to know that a divide does exist. No one is saying you created the divide. It is equally imperative to own what is ours to own. Standing in solidarity with the hurting, with the marginalized, is Christ-like. Felicia, you and I are of the 92% of people, of Black women who voted for democracy, with the threat of the dismantling of democracy before us. And after the election, and we did not get the results that, I mean, I 100% believed that she would become the next president of the United States. There was no doubt in me. And then the shock of America being America, as it always has been, was so painful. And then there became the social media trend of Black women opting out. Once we saw the numbers, you know, when we have stood in the front lines against oppression, against Asian hate, for the LGBTQIA community, for against genocide in Sudan, in Congo, in Gaza. And we have stood with so many people only to see that the people that we thought were our true allies were not. And many of us said, I am opting out of standing on the front line. Sis, tired now. I'm I'm going to sip my tea and eat my popcorn and watch it all unfold because I did everything that I could do. You know, Black women have historically been the savers, you know, the helpers. And I want to know what your thoughts are about this opting out, about this saying, I can't do anymore. So I'm just going to take care of me and mine. Could you share your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I have so many. You know, I think a lot of our pain is tied to injured expectations. And what I mean by that is that I think we are upset to the degree of our emotional investment in our programs for happiness. And when I have an imagined outcome in my head, and reality does not line up with what I hope for, what I picture, I experience suffering. And that suffering is very real, right? But I compound that suffering when I cannot um, accept the tragic events that play out in life and accept what is, right? And so, from a contemplative standpoint, I get that. I understand that. It is what it is. It is as it is. I see that. I'm aware of it. But as a Black woman in the throes of this, I think for a lot of us, right, our hearts, like you said, there's no way that we could fathom someone reelecting the former president, particularly after the insurrection that happened 4 years ago. And and so I think in a lot of ways, the story that I tell myself when I look at the numbers um, is that every other voting bloc would rather see a convicted felon hold the highest position in our country than a Black female because we feel safer and more secure when white men run things, even if they run them in the ground. And we still prefer a white man over a Black woman. And that's a deep kind of personal hurt. It's an affront, really. And so because of that intimate rejection um, that Black women have harbored and weathered for a really long time, I do understand the opting out. And it goes back again to agency and choice. And, so my response is take care of yourself. The question, back to see the motivation, the question is, in taking care of yourself, pause long enough to ask, all things considered, what's the most loving thing I can do right now for myself, for my community, for the world? And to get quiet enough, right, that the whisper of that can come to the fore. And if that looks like I need to sit for a while and sip tea, read a book, take a walk, take a bath, do that. If that looks like re-engaging in some kind of way, but let the seed of motivation be not vengeance, not fear, not resistance, but love. So all things considered, this affront feels real. The pain feels real. I could not even keep my head up the day after the election. My whole body, it just kept, I was like, I got to go take a nap. And I ended up taking a 3 or 4 hour nap because I couldn't hold the weight of the grief from the day. What's loving for me is to share that rejection with the earth. The earth has held so much for us. And it feels weird for a lot of people, but that's one of the things that I do is I go and I put my hands and my face down into the earth because the earth is our mother. The earth is our container, our keeper. It's a bearer. Trees hold so many secrets, right? And I know that the earth has the weight to hold what I can't. So this is the beauty of us in community together as well. So I'm never going to tell someone not to opt out if that's what they need for their sanity and their care. But what I want is for us to feel our grief and to lament, because a lot of times society does not allow that place for grief or lament. And then all that stuff is just in us. It's just in us. And we go cycles and cycles and cycles and generations of holding. And I think this election for a lot of women really is the invitation of the release of generations of trauma and pain of that rejection. We didn't get the outcome we wanted, but we did get an invitation.
Yeah.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah, Felicia, thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like there's so many more things I could ask and, want to dive into, but yeah, for now, I think that's really wonderful. And I just want to encourage everyone to get this beautiful book and The Restorative Power of Love in an Either or World. And thank you so much, Felicia, for being with us. Such a gift to, yeah. You have a really beautiful presence to you and love's presence comes through you really beautifully. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was really, really my great delight and joy to be with both of you today. Your smiles you light up my heart so much. Thank you for the opportunity.